I think that's actually a really good segue into our first topic regarding those PlayStation exclusives and cross-platform support. So, for those of you who haven't been following, Sony has been getting hurt in the PR department lately when it comes to cross-platform play. And of course, this has become a major pull for a lot of companies, whether it's PC to console, console to PC, or even just being able to play with other people on Xbox to Switch or stuff along those lines when it would happen. But the big thing, of course, has been Fortnite, that little game that nobody has ever heard of. And I'm sure, Rob, you've never heard of that either when it comes to esports.
No, I haven't heard of Fortnite. It's sad. Something about 2 weeks. That's
yeah. But as we all know, during E3 of this year, it was revealed as a surprise, or I guess surprise in air quotes there, that Fortnite went onto the Switch, and that would also feature cross-platform play. We've seen this with the mobile versions, the PC version, and even I'm pretty sure it's on Xbox One, right? Am I imagining it, or
it must be, but I don't know offhand. I'm totally speaking out of turn when I say that.
Let's see. Yeah, apparently it is available on Xbox One as well. So everyone was excited to get that cross-platform play, more importantly, get that cross-account play, so that if I'm on the Switch, I unlock something, I can take it to the PC, go to the Xbox, and everybody gets all in and around there. Except for Sony, as Sony had locked Fortnite to the PS4. So that if you play on the PS4, you can take your unlocks to other platforms and vice versa. And with Sony being the only major holdout, as well as when it comes to other cross-platform games like Rocket League, and let me see, and Minecraft as well. Man, they're just going against the big three there, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, those are pretty big.
That Sony is, of course, the only one who's been holding out on this. And a quote by their CEO, Kenshiro Yoshida, who I didn't butcher that too much, he said this line, and I'm sure this will go over very well. On cross-platform, our way of thinking is always that PlayStation is the best place to play. Fortnite, I believe, partner with PlayStation 4 is the best experience for users. So they're trying to use we're trying to look at the users, they're the reasons why we're not doing cross-platform support. And people aren't buying it. And
yeah.
What do you think about this one?
I mean, cross-platform's an interesting beast. I mean, it's not an easy thing to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
But for a console to say, nope, not us, especially when you got a game like Fortnite. Now, I know Sony's not hurting for money. I know they're not hurting for sales. They are a great system, the PlayStation. Mm-hmm. But to just basically say, you know what, we're not going to be inclusive about this, it seems weird because you're basically forcing a player who wants to play Fortnite, which is everybody, to make an option, or make a choice, and that is either go buy another console or another system, or have your friends jump on PlayStation. Now, certainly not every game supports cross-platform play, and for a lot of great reasons, including that it's difficult, especially with an older game, to port. But if you're making money, it's something probably worth even considering. But yeah, because there's always that divide of I'm on Xbox, I'm on PlayStation, and my version of the game is the best, and no, my version of the game is the best. It really is. If you're about being inclusive with games, if you're okay having games that are on other systems, then you know what, let other people jump on that. Be friendly to developers, be friendly to the fans, because it only helps you.
Mm-hmm. And regarding the whole Xbox versus PlayStation, I'm sure nobody's made a video about that on YouTube at all in these last few years. We could be the first there, Rob. We could do it right now.
Be great. Groundbreaking. I did notice that we actually, in terms of cross-platform play, I think that's one of those topics we haven't yet broached. So it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree with you, Rob, about it is just better for the fans that way. Because it allows, especially for something like Fortnite or Minecraft, or again, like with the big three in Rocket League, when you have all these unlocks and all this content, especially with how much people are getting around doing stuff, it just makes sense to be able to just, play where you want. If I want to start on PlayStation, go to Switch, go to the PC, and then go back to PlayStation, it's not really hurting your bottom line, especially if everybody else is doing it. Or if the developer themselves is basically handling that work on their own, which I think that's what Epic is doing with Fortnite. I think they're pretty much handling it all on their end.
Yeah, I mean you have to. There's I don't think Xbox and Sony are ever going to get together and be like, hey, you know what we should do is natively support cross-platform play between us. No, I mean that's something that the developer has to take upon themselves and work really hard to make that happen. So yeah, if you do that and you make that all that effort and Sony's like, nope, sorry, we're not going to do that, you just wasted a lot of money. And the other side is, what is Sony hoping to accomplish? Like, what do you think that their end game is with not allowing cross-platform play? What is their thought process?
Yeah, I don't know. And we've seen people discuss about their issues with Sony and how they really haven't been doing too much to improve or evolve their online experience, at least compared to what Microsoft has been offering with their the Xbox Games Pass and stuff along those lines. And it's definitely been, and this probably leads into a greater issue about what happens when you're the top and you don't really need to innovate or iterate on your focus or your design anymore. Because we've seen people have similar complaints about Valve and Steam. But again, Valve is just such a non-entity when it comes to everything else in the industry. That's kind of hard to put them into the same place as other companies.
Yeah, and as far as platforms go, Steam is really more of a distribution center, a store, and they are the dominant one. So, I mean, they don't care like what you do with your game, like how cross-platform it is. They don't care about exclusivity. They're just there for you to give them money, and they will give you whatever you want. And that's its own problems that we've gone over in the past. But like, they're a monopoly, and they're kind of like, no one can argue that right now. But yeah, if you're on top, like Apple's has the same problems. Like you have all the Android devices are innovating like crazy, and you can pick any modern Android device and compare it with an Apple device and be like, well, this one's like light years ahead of this one, but this one's just stable and whatever. Like the arguments are whatever you want to make. But like, yeah, if you're a console, and I mean, they're not like so dominant that they can just willy-nilly do this. I can't imagine that anyone's actually going to buy a PlayStation just to play Fortnite on the PlayStation. And I also imagine likewise that Sony's like, well, the reverse is also not going to happen. We're not going to lose any customers because of this. So why? But when the next generation comes out, would someone more willingly switch? No pun intended, because of that? It's hard for me to say.
Yeah. And I think that's what Sony is gambling on as well. Like, they know that, these games may be big, but they're not exactly system sellers to Sony. Like, why would someone buy, a PlayStation 4 is never going to be a dedicated Minecraft machine or a dedicated Fortnite machine. So it makes no sense for them to encourage that or, even be, in the middle about it. But in the court of public opinion, though, it's definitely hurting them. And again, with where we're at in this console generation, we've been talking about this. I know we brought this up a few months ago, that it feels like it's about time for another console generation, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely, especially with the increasing technology in VR, and all of a sudden you have new television resolutions, and those aren't going to be natively supported forever. So you gotta upgrade your system to support upgraded technologies in televisions, monitors, internet speeds, and that kind of thing.
Now, whether we'll have another console generation after that one still remains to be seen. But as you said, whenever we have these major jumps in terms of TV support, internet, it does call for the consoles or for the hardware market to kind of grow and match that. I think a big point, one I know this was brought up, was regarding the original plan for the Xbox One to be just entirely download based. It wouldn't allow you to have a physical discs.
Hmm.
Now, 5, 6 years ago, that would have been, suicide. Internet speeds weren't at their point yet and stuff like that. But flash forward today, and the internet, at least in the United States, is certainly a lot more capable. I mean, I don't have the highest tier here, but I'm getting at least over 200 Mbps for downloads. I'm
Yeah.
sure. And do you have like what your average is?
I mean, I just bought a gigabit thing. My new location allows for gigabits. So, I mean, yeah, I want to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that one, the U.S. is so far behind in internet speeds,
Mm.
but like half of it is because our technology doesn't feel the need to move forward and
Yeah.
as fast as it should. But like, if consumers started getting these speeds and the upgrades in televisions just kind of comes naturally, then yeah, that support's going to have to come, and the technology, the hardware that goes into reading discs and that kind of thing is way more fragile than just a system that's a hard drive.
Yeah. And another big point that people may not understand is that just because your download speed is high, if the infrastructure from the server you're downloading for cannot support that bandwidth, you're never going to see that full support, see that full use. Like when I'm
Hmm.
downloading stuff from Steam, I may have a 200 to 300 Mbps download speed, but I'm still routinely getting about 10, maybe a little less Mbps while I'm downloading from the Steam servers. Same goes for Sony. And yeah, it would be amazing. Like, just imagine how quick it would be to just load up on Sony and say, "Oh, I have 100 Mbps download. I can download God of War in like half a second."
Yeah, yeah, and that is so. I mean, it already is. Even no matter the internet speeds, like
Hmm.
it's easier for me to download a game than to go out to the store and
Hmm.
buy a game and come back, even if it takes longer to do so downloading. But yeah, if Sony were to be like download only and we'll make our bandwidth as fast as you guys can handle, well, then they don't need Walmart. They don't need a
Hmm.
middleman. And I mean, Steam's already taken advantage of that. They are the outlet.
Yep.
But like, and that's another part of it is like, what say does Walmart have and Target? They're huge. Like their deals with Sony and Nintendo and Microsoft are probably just ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
And if suddenly there's a lot of leverage for Microsoft and Sony if they start to threaten, well, we're doing download only now. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
To which Walmart and Target might say, well, we're not going to support your system. We're not going to sell your system anymore.
But at that point, I think like Microsoft and Sony basically say, "Okay, see you guys later. Enjoy all the sales you're never going to get anymore."
Hmm.
Because it's always been a very weird relationship between the stores and the consoles, or we should say the stores to the consoles to the developers and then to the publishers.
Hmm. And the consumers.
Mm-hmm. Because again, we've seen in the past how much control the market has, the stores have had over what they put in there, because there's no other alternative. And I'm sure you, as much as I do, remember when we were first starting to see this idea of download or virtual store saying we'll never have to go to never have to go to a GameStop again. What will they do now? And it's been very slow because I think the consoles have still being hamstrung by these stores. Because again, you don't want to lose out on GameStop sales. I mean, I'm sure Activision still makes a pretty penny day one Call of Duty when it goes up at a GameStop, and the same goes for Walmart and Target. But again, if the technology can match and they don't need to deal with them anymore, why should they still support these stores?
Yeah, and I mean, the sales numbers, I don't know, like in terms of how many consoles are purchased via Amazon or just online in general versus in-store like purchase. That's something that I would like to know a little bit more about, because I'm sure that's a huge uh, gamble on either side, saying, you know what, well, we won't sell your consoles anymore,
Hmm.
and the other side saying, well, so what?
Yeah.
Because there's that group that buys stuff online, that group that doesn't, and being someone who just buys exclusively online, even groceries, a lot of times, like I embrace it, but a lot of people don't.
Hmm.
Going into a store and looking at the physical stuff, that's important,
Hmm.
and that's how I am for bookstores. It's like I would rather go to a bookstore to buy a book than go online and buy a book.
Yep.
So I can understand it from that side. So there's something to be said there. I don't know how those numbers are growing or shrinking or what.
Yep. Now, one other part that I want to discuss regarding this topic, then I'll throw it over to you, and if there's any questions, or we'll just move on to our next little segment, and that's the idea of cross-platform release or multi-platform releases for games, because this has been another very big topic, and one that's certainly been changing over these last few years. And again, for us old people talking here, we remember the days where the game was released on Sony, you're not going to find it on Nintendo, and vice versa.
Hmm.
And this led to pretty much a lot of games being system or platform locked. And when we did get those cross platform releases, it was always of lesser quality. Again, I'm sure many PC fans remember the horrors of getting those crappy console ports for big name games, be it having like very little features or just simply not working.
Hmm.
But in today's market, things have certainly shifted. We are seeing more games having same day releases on console and PC. We're seeing more companies support that. I mean, it was just announced a few weeks ago that Diablo 3 is going to be on the Nintendo Switch, which that is just as shocking after all the stuff that's going on. We're even seeing developers or companies like Bandai Namco have same day releases. I mean, Dark Souls, Dragon Ball Fighter Z, even and getting back to Sony, for instance, with the Yakuza series, while they have been exclusive to the Sony consoles for the last few years, we're finally seeing Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2 coming to the PC. And that, on one hand, for a lot of people, that doesn't sound all that amazing. Wow, I get to play another game. But you have to remember, these franchises have always been, for the longest time, locked to their consoles. As a big example of this, it was announced that Monster Hunter World, that got a either same day or was eventually ported to the PC, has had one of the highest record-breaking sales for that franchise. And I know what people are going to say, well, duh. I mean, the more platforms you put it on means more people can buy it. But there is a stigma for the longest time that these very niche or very specific games wouldn't sell well on other platforms. I remember stuff like Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts and Viva Pinata being locked to the 360, or, I'm sorry, they were ported to games for Windows Live, a service I'm sure everybody watching this loved and supported for years to come. But there's always been that stigma, and it led to people having to make their own games. I mean, Stardew Valley was infamously said as, they're not making Harvest Moon for PC, so I'm going to make it for the PC. And lo and behold, it sold really well. But that stigma is dying, or it's going away, and it's meaning a lot of big things. So, as someone who's done video game producing on multiple platforms, whether in the past or with 2K now, what do you think about this growing cross-platform support?
I mean, I'm all in favor of it. Now, I think there's this reverse fear of,
Mm-hmm.
like, let's say Nintendo, in the miracle of miracles, just said, you know what, Mario, Zelda, it's going to be on everything. We're going to release it for Sony and Microsoft, and everyone in the world's like, yay, finally. And Halo to all platforms, and God of War to all platforms, and like, this would be like the miracle day of miracle days. I mean, is Nintendo afraid like suddenly their console business is going to go away? I mean, it's legitimate. Certainly, they're
Mm-hmm.
more family friendly, but hardware wise, they can't compete with Sony and Microsoft. And likewise, Microsoft might be like, okay, well, if we release Halo on everybody, why would anyone buy the Xbox anymore?
Yeah.
They just buy a fat controller for Sony and go with that. Like, um, and then Sony, I don't know so much. Like, I don't think Sony would lose many sales if they put all their titles out. I think that they do. I think they think that they're the best hardware, and in terms of consoles, I think that they've established themselves as pretty damn good. So, but I can see Microsoft and Nintendo's hesitancy to put their IP out for the world, even though that might generate sales enough for them to not care about console anymore.
And I think you got a good point there, Rob, about that kind of fear of exclusivity. Because, as you said, with some of these big name games, I mean, the whole reason you're going to buy these platforms are for them. Draken mentioned Halo, of course, the Master Chief Collection, having those issues on the PC. But it comes down to this: like, why would you buy a console if you can just get the same games for everywhere else? It's the same console versus PC argument. Why should a PC fan buy the console version of the game when the PC can be a lot more powerful, have mods like the ones Draken mentioned in chat, and so on and so forth? And it does raise that question. This is one I don't think we're ever going to get a straight answer to. How much sales would a console exclusive game get versus being, cross-platform? Like with something like a Super Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild. Imagine if it got ported to PC. Would it make more sales than if it was just exclusively locked to the Switch?
Now, we do actually have a real-world example of this, and that is Sega. There was a certain point in time
yes.
where they basically were forced to sell their games on other platforms. And I believe they basically went with Nintendo. You guys can let me know. I don't know if did they release any collections on Sony and Microsoft.
Well, they are certainly doing games on all the platforms now. Okay. I mean, Yakuza is now Sega owned, and it's now on PC and PS4. They own Atlas as well. So
they went games, and they're seem to do just fine. But again, I don't know how much money is in the console market. I know it is way more expensive to be in the console market, but maybe that's worth it. I don't know. I mean, certainly you get to be the guy who says we're taking 30% of all the games. But besides that,
yeah. And I'm just looking here, like, whenever we see some of these games getting released over here, like Yakuza, it does open up the door for more of those titles. And again, it would be amazing to see something like Persona 5 on the PC. Like, that would be huge. And I think just as you said earlier, like, I'm definitely for getting more cross-platform support, because ultimately it's going to help these games more. Even if these systems themselves may be losing out, it will give developers a greater shot of making that money in order to keep supporting these developers and such.
Yeah, and you also run that risk of, well, what if Halo just takes your sales away, your own IP sales away? I mean, yes, but you're still taking that money off the top. I don't know. It's a weird argument, and I'm sure that the businesses themselves have had this discussion many times, like especially in the wake of Sega going out of business. I'm sure they're like, well, what happens if we decide to just stop making consoles and just push all of our amazing IP, like Nintendo more than anybody? It's hard for me to imagine. Like, I can imagine Halo being wherever, because to me it's fairly. I'm not a fan, so and I'm probably like doing that thing where I'm alienating the fans of the game, but like I can see that on whatever console. To me it's a first person shooter that's relatively generic otherwise. But for Mario, for Zelda, for Metroid, like I can't disassociate those from Nintendo.
Yeah. And like with these major releases, again, it's going to be very interesting to see how these studios are going to adapt to the fact that more people want to play them on their chosen platform. And with so many games being released these days, I think this kind of goes back to what we were just saying regarding the whole publisher versus store mindset of who has leverage. And with so many games being released, you can't really hold on to just that one game anymore. Like, you can argue, yes, games like God of War or Red Dead or Call of Duty are going to move platforms. But at the end of the day, everybody's getting flooded with games. And it's very hard to, I think, find that excuse me, that one game that's going to make you go, I need to buy this platform. I mean, Nintendo, as you just said, I think Nintendo is probably one of the few developers or publishers that still have that pull. Again, when Nintendo announces a new Mario game, when they announce a new Smash Brothers, I'm pretty sure Switch sales went through the roof for that period of time.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, the fan base for the Nintendo games, in terms of passion, I believe it far outweighs any of the other properties that go with Sony or Microsoft. And I could be completely wrong, but I doubt it. Like, yes, I feel like as a Sony or Xbox, PlayStation or Xbox owner, I'm way more likely to also own a Switch than I am the other console, because the Switch has way more unique content on it than, say, the Xbox would if I own a PlayStation, and vice versa.
But people have been talking about, going back to your point earlier on Nintendo, there's always been discussion about what would happen if Nintendo went third party. And it would definitely be an amazing day. Just imagine the shock of seeing Mario on PlayStation 4. That may shut things down for a little bit. But I also do think some of it, as you said, is kind of like that pride of the platform. With Sony CEO earlier saying that he feels that the PlayStation is the best console experience. I'm sure Microsoft says something similar, and I'm sure Nintendo does as well. And that level of control has been a major factor. I mean, we've seen this with kind of the falling out of EA and Steam, when EA won more control over DLC releases and microtransaction sales, and Valve basically said no. And like EA said, well, we're not going to put Mass Effect 3 on Steam. They're like, okay,
yeah,
bye,
whatever.
See you later. And I doubt we're going to be seeing Anthem on Steam as well. And again, like, we hear these discussions about, if Call of Duty is not on Steam, or if Overwatch will never be ported to Steam, those games are going to die. No, not really. I mean, again, if the game is big enough, people are going to play wherever they can, as with the Fortnite case. I mean, I'm sure Valve would like Fortnite to be on Steam, but at the end of the day, it's not hurting Epic one way or the other where that game is going to be posted.
Right. And same with Steam. Like, I'm going to be on Steam as long as they're around, and because I've got all my games in my library on Steam, and I don't care. Like, I like playing The Sims, but am I going to miss playing Sims 4 on Steam? No, I'm not. I don't care. There's plenty of other games for me to play.
Yeah. Anthem. That's probably another discussion we could have at some point once more news has been released. Will it kill BioWare or not? Oh, that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. But I think with that, we are about like 40 minutes in for our chat, so let's move on to our weird game segment. Before we do that, I guess, do you have any final thoughts on the topic, Rob?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm very glad we went into this topic. I think it's a really cool discussion to have, and it really does. It plays at the hearts of all of our gaming selves. Like, I want to play this game so bad. Do I want to play it bad enough to buy a console, or that specific console? I think that's a great discussion, and it's one that, coming from our generation, and certainly my generation being a little earlier than that, you had no choice.
Yeah.
There's a cartridge. You can't do cross-platform with a cartridge. I'm sorry, but having that discussion now is very good, and it suggests to me that we're all going in the right direction.
Yeah. And as a semi-tangent, I would love to talk to someone from Sega about how things have gone. But, if someone would like to give me a name of someone to talk to there, please let me know. But, again, like, Sega has certainly been, like,